Hello, everyone, and welcome to another talk in our Alumni at Home with Mac New Year, New Mindset series. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, I'd like to thank you for joining us to hear from our favorite registered dietitian, Jenille Hutchinson. Before I begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the land on which this webinar is taking place is on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. When I was looking at the registration list, I noticed lots of familiar names. So thanks to those who continue to support our programming, whether it's through this series or through our OAP or our caregivers or our other alumni events. It's really nice to have you continue to enjoy the talks. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, a special welcome to you. And I hope this won't be your last webinar that you attend. This is our second last talk in the At Home with Mac series, and we're hopeful that all of the talks that you've been able to attend have helped shift your mindset as you embark on new goals and new aspirations. Just a reminder, because this is a fun series, for every event that you register for and attend, you'll be entered into a random draw for a chance to win one of 3 Philips Smart Sleep wake-up lights. Winners will be contacted the week of February 5th. Unfortunately, I'm at home, so I can't show you. One webinar, I was at work and I just showed, and so we do have them, and we will give them out to you. A reminder that this talk is being recorded, as all our talks are recorded, and you'll receive an email with the link to the recording in a few days. With that, any resources that Jenille talks about, we can put that in the email as well. So this is, I think, Jenille's third or fourth talk with us. And as always, whenever we have Jenille doing a talk, we are inundated with questions. So thank you for all of those pre-submitted questions that you gave us during the registration process. Most of those questions will be addressed during Jenille's conversation. I sent those to Jenille and we sort of talked about them. There were lots of questions, and we appreciate all the questions. There were lots of questions that were very specific to one individual, and I think we're going to try to keep it as broad as possible. So when you're asking your questions during the Q&A period, if you can make them sort of as broad and as applicable to as many people, that would be great. So instead of asking, oh, I'm a 32-year-old, how much protein should I be having? Something like, oh, how much protein should a person have? That way, it's just we can make sure that we get to as many questions as possible that are sort of as applicable to as many people watching today. So now, with all of that out of the way, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jenille Hutchinson. She's a registered dietitian with extensive knowledge on the relationship between nutrition and mental health. And why is that? Well, because she is a Mac grad through psychology, neuroscience, and behavior, which is what she graduated. And then she went on to Western, just up the road, down to Western University, where she did her Honours Bachelor of Science in Nutritional Sciences. She then went on and did a Master's in Food and Nutritional Sciences, again at Western. And she has a private practice called Feed Your Soul, where she helps clients of all ages, all demographics. And we're so happy that she's sort of our resident nutritionist, a registered dietitian, and we're thrilled that she could join us again. She just had a baby less than a year ago to add to her family of 5, 3 kids, and her husband and herself, and a furry baby too.
Yeah.
a full house for sure. So thank you, Jenille, for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Okay. All right. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And I know it's a little bit late, but I'm going to wish Happy New Year because we are starting off with a lot of, everybody, it's New Year time. Everyone wants to make certain changes and, looking at it as a fresh start. So today we're really going to be diving into a pretty hot topic. And it's something that is really, as I said, affects us all. And it's quite, as I said, I think we're going to talk about quite some interesting things today. So how to revitalize our health by reducing ultra-processed foods and embracing a nourishing 2020. go. So Christine did a great bio about me. And yes, anyone who's seen presentations before, I would always say, oh, yes, you know, we have family of four, plus a four baby, but we've added, I had a beautiful baby boy. And so, yes, now a mother of three. And yes, it does make a change. But you know what? The way I feel so blessed, and it's something that we embrace. And just again, being a mom and being a dietitian, and I'm really that type of person that really just looks about how do we enjoy life. And of course, when we're enjoying life, nutrition is in. So I'm learning a lot. My kids, they teach me a lot about nutrition. So as Christine said, yes, I've got quite an extensive education, but we all know education takes you so far, but the practical aspects of life. And that's one thing that I truly, truly, say believe and enforce in my practice is about life. And how do we live realistically in this world that, we can be healthy, enjoy. And when I speak with my clients and speak with groups, one thing they realize is that that's the approach I take. So I'm not one that's going to say, yes, you got to follow this diet, you got to do this, you got to do that. I believe you've got to do what works for you, and everyone's on their own particular journey. And as I said, being a mom, my kids are quite young, but they're teaching me that as much best laid plans, trust me, we all know sometimes fall apart, right? So even when it comes to my kids and nutrition, we talk about a lot of things that, yeah, even in this presentation I came across, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to change some of these things too. So I really hope you can gather some information that you can apply to your particular lifestyle today. Okay, so let's just dive. All right. So one thing I want you to think about as we go through is what comes to mind when you think about processed foods. Okay, always have that question in your mind as we go through the presentation. So I have a picture here just to kind of get that, get the mind going, get brainstorming going. And when we think about processed foods, take a look at this picture. And a lot of times, a lot of people think, chips. So yeah, well, I don't eat processed foods because I don't eat chips, or I don't eat cake, or I don't eat all these different types of food that comes in packaging. But we're going to see here that it comes more, it's a little bit more detailed than that. It's not just, the chips, the pop, things that, yeah, are in your face processed, candies, that type of thing. But if you even just take a look at this picture, you'll see there's quite a range of things that come to mind. And I even thought about some of my biases too, because for me, I was thinking chemicals and science and that type of thing. But it goes a little bit more beyond that. So what's the difference? And I want you to think about that most foods undergo some type of process. So what is the key to take away is the degree of processing. So a lot of times people think processing is unhealthy, but no, that's not the case. We've got to look a little bit deeper. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because given where we live, we live in North America. And so a lot of times when you think about certain foods that we eat, how are we eating those foods when you think about if you're having pineapple right now? So we're going to talk about that. But I want you to kind of think about that process does not always mean unhealthy. So think about how food processing helps us. It's used to preserve the shelf life of certain foods. So thinking about, let's say, even for yourself, if you grow things in your garden and you want to preserve some of those things and keep some of those things longer, canning is a way of processing your food. Drying, just simply drying. So it's taking it from its original state into another state. That's process. So there may not be any chemicals involved, let's say, in your drying your herbs from your garden so you can keep them, past the growing season. But also thinking about how food is transported, getting food from, one country to another, increasing our food safety. So these are ways that are positive how food processing has influence in our life and in the foods we eat. So this is just a quick little spectrum when I'm thinking about, let's say, the apple. Now, I do apologize. I see that the writing is a bit fuzzy, but the gist of this picture is going from the apple to the green apple gummy bear. Yes, you've got your fresh, unprocessed apple. Then we go through different stages. And so, as I said, what's important is thinking about the degree of processing, and we're going to get into that. So, the thing I want you to think about is there's a system, and it's called the NOVA classification system. I just want to say NOVA because I thought it stood for something. It doesn't stand for something, it's just the name. So keep that in mind. It's not an acronym. So it's a classification that categorizes food according to how it's been processed. So as I said, the degree of processing is what's important to take note of as we go through this presentation, because as I said, food, especially given the way we live nowadays, where we are not growing our food or our livestock. That's not how we live. We go to the grocery store. So a great amount of our food is processed. But what's important is the degree of processing. And I think it's important we go through this so that we can understand that and again have a better understanding of what it means for food to be processed. So group one, minimally processed or unprocessed foods. Excuse me. So they may have been roasted, boiled, pasteurized in order to increase, again, that shelf life stability. So remember, I was talking about the herbs. You may harvest some herbs from your garden, or if we're thinking about milk, even, we don't drink milk directly from the cow, right? There is some type of pasteurization that goes through it to increase the safety of that milk we drink. Thinking about frozen fruit, vegetables, those undergo some type of process. So they're picked in their whole form. But in order, again, for that transportation and to increase shelf life, they undergo some processing in order to be able to be in our grocery stores and to last longer. So these are some examples when you think about even nuts, beans, things that are roasted and dried. But we consider those, again, minimally processed. And of course, if you're just taking that apple off the tree, from your garden or at the farm, that of course is unprocessed. Now we're thinking about fruit two. So now we're moving along the spectrum. So these are processed culinary ingredients that are obtained from group one or directly from nature. So we're thinking about things like maple syrup, olive oil. So again, we've got the olive, again, goes through some processing so that we can get the oil. So it's not that processing step between the olive to get to the oil has undergone, vast chemical processes to get that way, especially if you're choosing a pure form. Now, of course, we do know with oils, that's another long story we can get on. We're talking about, some of the more pure versions. And so just getting that olive oil goes underneath some process. Even thinking about people who like to drink milk beverages. So that's another example. What I mean by that is like soybeans. How does soybeans become soy milk? Again, there's some processing to get to the different state. Maple syrup, from the tree. Getting the maple syrup from the tree undergoes a bit of processing to get the one that we can safely consume or that's in our grocery store. So that's what group two tells us. Now group three. Now these ones here, again, remember, going along the spectrum. So these here are food items that are made by adding an ingredient like salt or sugar or substances from food. So we're thinking here about cheese. So, I personally have never made cheese, but thinking about the process that it goes through, maybe adding some salts, different flavorings, that type of thing to get from the form of when it's milk into cheese form. Fresh bread, we're taking whole grain and again processing those grains and then adding certain things like salts, leavening agents to get our bread. Now, again, it's gone some processing to go from the grain form to the bread that we'll eat, or fruits and syrup. So, a lot of times, especially when it comes to baking, people will use certain fruits. And I know we just kind of came out of that season, Christmas. So I think that's what I was thinking about too, is that when you have certain fruits that were preserved in a bit of syrup or even fruit juice in order to enhance the flavoring. So these are things that are in group 3. Now group 4. This is the one when we're thinking about our ultra processed foods. And you'll see me use UPF throughout the presentation. Again, that just means ultra processed foods, okay? But these are the foods now that contain little or none of the original ingredients. So we've gone from, as we want to look here at these nacho Doritos, pop donuts. And these are the foods that are convenient, very tasty. So they're full of salts and sugars and whatnot at low cost. Preservatives, these are refined grains. So these are the ones now when we're thinking about the ultra processed foods that we have to keep in mind. So there's really nothing like, if we think about, even just to pick on another one, that Sunkist pop that has the orange on it. Honestly, there's probably 0 orange actually in that. It's all flavoring, chemicals, colorings. So little to most likely none of the original fruit, which is supposed to be an orange, is actually in that drink. Okay, so again, these are our group 4. So what are some things we want to look at? Ultra processed or highly processed foods contain substances like hydrolyzed proteins, modified starches, hydrogenated oils, colorants, flavoring, artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, because again, they're going to mimic the taste. And they're actually mimicking the taste and heightening the taste. Because if you think about this, I'm going to pick the orange again, and then orange candy, they taste quite different, even though they'll say, yes, this is an orange flavored Jolly Rancher or Jelly Bean. But if you think about it, it has so much more of the sugars and emulsifiers, colors, all those things that really calling it orange is really just, I think, for the color aspect. But relating it to the actual fruit, that's quite deceiving. So we want to really think about that, and especially when we are looking at foods, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of how to choose your foods and how to make these choices so that your foods are not, if you want to say, taken away from it so much from the original form, and we're not just consuming a whole bunch of modified starches, hydrolyzed proteins, those types of things. But we'll discuss that. So this here is just a chart that I thought really nicely laid it out, kind of a summary of what I just discussed of the different stages or classifications. So we've got unprocessed, minimally processed foods in the green. As I said, those are the ones that are pretty much in their original form or minimally processed, because sometimes, again, something like milk, for us to drink the milk, it has to go underneath boiling something for it to be safe for us to consume. Excuse me. Then we have our processed culinary ingredients. So this is our butter, this is maple syrup, salt, sugars. So it's taken from our original form. So like salts come from, the actual rocks that you get the salt from, and purifying that so that we can actually use it into the table form. Even sugars come from the cane. They have to extract that. So taking something from its original form from group 1 so that we can use it. Then now as we move through, we've got our processed foods, again, that bread, cheese, where we're adding in a bit more stuff so that it's almost like a different type of food. And again, our ultra processed foods, these are the ones that are the ones we want to be a bit more wary about and have in moderation, or if we can, really limiting them to small amounts. They should not be making up the greater part of our diet. So you may be So really, what then is the real problem with having these foods? Like, what is it that makes having these ultra-processed foods so terrible? Or just, why is it such a big thing that we need to steer away from them? And I want us to just watch a quick video here to give us a bit of background.
So you're 160.5. Lovely. So step forward.
Amy and Nancy are 24-year-old twins.
So Amy and Nancy, what we want to do is to look at how food processing impacts your health.
They're taking part in a test with Dr. Sarah Berry and Professor Tim Spector from King's College London.
What you're going to do is for 2 weeks, Nancy, you're going to be doing the unprocessed diet, and Amy, you're going to be eating the ultra-processed diet. Then we're going to get you back here, and then we're going to do the same test again and look at how these different foods have impacted your health.
The twins' diet will be matched exactly for calories, nutrients, fat, sugar and fibre.
Ultra-processed food accounts for more than 50% of our energy intake, and it's an even bigger problem in children. So it accounts for about 65% of our energy intake for children. This is actually increasing at an alarming rate. We believe ultra-processed foods are having an unfavourable effect on our health is because the act of processing foods breaks down the structure of the foods. Often ultra-processed foods have very little fibre in them, or the fibre is removed. Many of these ingredients most people won't have heard of. But what we don't know is how all of these different chemicals might interact together in terms of our health.
I do eat some processed foods just out of convenience, but I do love lots of fresh foods and have quite a healthy diet, I think. So I think it is going to be a bit of a shift.
For breakfast this morning, I had a quinoa porridge with berries on top, and it's done a really good job at keeping me energised and full.
So it's the end of the day now, and I've got a bit of a headache, to be honest. So yeah, ending the day, still hungry, feeling a bit sort of rubbish, and yeah, a bit of a headache.
Lots of the things that you've just described about your headache all point to the fact that you're probably having what we call a glucose dip, which is a dip in blood sugar that happens about 2 to 4 hours after people consume really heavily processed, refined carbohydrates.
So this is a mousse made with fruit puree and only 73 calories.
Yeah, you'd think that would be a healthy option.
Oh my goodness.
Pork gelatin, glucose fructose syrup, acidity regulator, citric acid, sodium hydroxide, modified maize starch.
There's a term we use called the health halo, where you have packaging says high in fibre or low in sugar, low in salt, plant-based, all of these kind of magic words that make people think, wow, these are really healthy. If anything ever says low, reduced or no, I'd always be a bit suspicious, because how else have they therefore made that food taste great?
In the last decade, the evidence has been slowly growing that ultra-processed food is harmful for us in ways we hadn't thought.
The twins find there is one ingredient they keep seeing again and again on food packets.
And then the emulsifiers again. We've seen that a few times, haven't we?
Emulsifiers are essentially a glue. They stick components together so that they have a good mouthfeel and they don't fall apart in your mouth or on the plate. So here we have carboxymethylcellulose, CMC, which is one of the commonest emulsifiers used in the food industry. And I'm just going to demonstrate what happens when you just add water to it, and it very rapidly becomes like a glue.
The food industry uses around 60 different emulsifiers to enhance the appearance, texture and shelf life of ultra-processed foods. Some are naturally occurring, others are chemically produced.
It's found in an incredible number of our foods, and they are potentially harmful.
Dr. Mathilde Touvier is leading one of the world's biggest studies into food additives, publishing regular reports based on the health and eating habits of 174,000 people. She's been looking at emulsifiers' long-term impact on health. The BBC has had exclusive access to the early results. They're yet to be verified by peer review, but she says they're concerning.
We observed significant associations between emulsifier intake and increased risk of cancer overall and breast cancer notably, but also with cardiovascular diseases.
In England, Wales and Northern Ireland, food safety is regulated by the Food Standards Agency, the FSA. It says it's about to launch a public consultation on some emulsifiers. A spokesperson for the Food and Drink Federation said, "Food manufacturers take the health of consumers and safety of the food they produce seriously and adhere to the strict regulations. In the UK, all additives are independently and rigorously assessed to safety by the Food Standards Agency before they can be used in food." The results of the twins' test are now in.
Amy, you were on the ultra-processed food diet. Your results were really quite different to your sisters. They were far worse. Your blood fat levels actually went up. Your lipids, which are markers of heart disease, they were increased. Your blood sugar was noticeably worse. You actually gained weight, nearly a kilogram, and you actually lost weight.
It's a bit scary, isn't it, after only 2 weeks to see those sorts of results?
So just imagine what that would be over 20 years.
After just 2 weeks of the test, the impact of Amy's ultra-processed diet will be fully reversible. But the results are in line with a growing body of evidence linking chemical additives and ultra-processing to serious health consequences.
We already have the most obese children in Europe. That means more type 2 diabetes, more cancers, more heart disease, more misery, more mental illness. This really is a future time bomb.
There are now dozens of scientific studies warning of the dangers of diets high in ultra-processed food. The twins' test showed the potential impact these foods can have on you in just 2 weeks. Esme Stallard, BBC News.
I really like that study because, again, it was done with twins, right? So identical twins, and looking at 2 weeks of what ultra-processed foods can do. And it is wow. And again, for myself, as as a dietitian and as a mother, thinking about the types of foods that kids like, that are marketed towards children, it really makes you think like, okay, right? So just some things to consider. So in our Canadian population, the highest amounts of ultra-processed foods, the proportion is there's higher odds of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, of course, compared to those who don't have a diet high in ultra-processed food. So as you can see there, that study is just flowing and behind what we just saw in that video, just having so much more of these foods in our diet, the negative influence that they can do. And one of the things that I thought was, oh my goodness, thank God it's reversible. They're like that, like 2 weeks that the twin that had the ultra process, imagine you're that twin, just thinking, oh my goodness. Thank God that those were reversible. But again, we're thinking about a lifetime of including these foods in our diet. What does that mean? So we want to always remember that ultra-processed foods are nutritionally poor and harmful for our health. The more ultra-processed foods consumed leads to the overall just the worsening of our diet and even diet-related behaviors, and putting that in conjunction with some other things that we may be predisposed to. So we have to think about that also. Something like diabetes runs in our family, high blood pressure, all of these types of things. We need to think about that in regards to our diet and how all of these things are working against us. So as we see that they're taking the place of certain foods. So when we eat more of these ultra-processed foods, we tend to eat less fruits and vegetables, fibers, dietary and antioxidants, all of these things. Because those foods are taking that place. And these are just things that from the studies, but I see it in my practice where, again, we live a life of convenience. And so a lot of times people will grab something at the Tim Hortons or, some type of bar, that you'll buy from the store. They have all these fancy granola bars, types of things. And yeah, but those types are taking place from some of the things that we could be having instead. And as I said, in conjunction with other characteristics we may have in terms of in our health, we're not really then helping for our overall health. So we've finally got to think about that, how much on the proportion ultra-processed foods are taking in our diet from the other types of foods that are more beneficial for our overall health. Stress. So a lot of times when we think about, what do we eat when we're stressed? Excuse me. A lot of times we go for high risk behaviors or things that are more unhealthy. Alcohol, smoking, or just ways that are more pleasurable. So the studies again have shown that chronic stress is positively associated with the tasty, more nutrient or food intake. I always say I always think about the movie Bridget Jones's Diary. It always stands out to me when, she's crying and depressed. What is she eating? A tub of ice cream when she's sad, depressed. No one's really, when they're sad, for the most part, going and saying, okay, I'm going to go have an apple, or what it's like, I'm going to have a piece of chocolate. I deserve that. We always feel that when we're down, we're going to have some of those foods, again, that aren't as healthy for us. But why? Why do we do that? Well, because it's shown that, it does have an effect on us, and it does actually have a positive effect on how we feel. So it's shown that it may activate that reward system in our body. So it's actually, we do feel better, and I would say better, quote unquote, when we do have that, let's say, that ice cream or that, let's say, that chocolate. And a lot of it, yes, there's that scientific side, but a lot of it also is behavior. Think about in movies or even maybe in your own family, when somebody's sad or when, they show that the child is crying, oh, here, would you like some ice cream? Or here's a lollipop. You go to the doctor and you're scared, as a child. Actually, the doctor did this with my kid. Gave them a lollipop. That's going to take away, the pain of the needle. No, but again, that sugar, color, sweet flavor is like, ooh, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good way to fool them from the actual situation. But again, it's these behaviors that are implanted in us from a young age. Is that sweet or salty? And the colors and all of that will elicit that positive reward system. So there actually is a physiological effect to that. But again, what we want to do is see how we can't always, we live in a stressful environment, okay? We could just turn on the news and you'll see right there, but we can't then, therefore, because of our environment now, with the stress environment, overload on all of these ultra-processed foods. So we've got to really find a way to find that balance. But again, knowledge is key in choosing, so what do I do? So just some food for thought. What do you eat when you're stressed? I want you to really think about that, because a lot of times we can say, I can see you and I can talk, but what do we really go for? I know, excuse me, that a lot of times, yeah, when I'm stressed, I like to, as I said, have a piece of chocolate, or, for me, I like to have fancy coffee. So it's like, okay, you know what? To give me a pick-me-up, maybe I'll go and have a latte, a different type rather than just my regular black coffee. That's what I like to drink it. But really think about, what do you like to eat when you're stressed? Because most of the times, it's not something you really need. And most of the time, it's not usually something that's healthier. So what can we do? Okay, so I'm talking about all this. So what can we actually do, okay, to help this? I'm trying to look for some healthier alternatives. So now we're going to make a shift. So now we said, okay, ultra processed foods regardless. So, okay, how can we do this? want you to consider eating whole foods. And I mentioned this actually when I was, and they're like, eating at Whole Foods? No, not the store. This has nothing to do with the store. They are not marketing the store. I do not work for Whole Foods. I'm talking about actual food. But what they call them is whole foods. And foods that go through no or minimally processed before purchased or harvested. So we're thinking about classification 1. When we thought about the NOVA classification system, we're thinking about number 1 when we say whole foods. And that's why I also thought about, just on a little side note, they're very smart in marketing and naming a grocery store Whole Foods. Because if you're now thinking, well, if I go to Whole Foods, then all the foods that they sell there must be unprocessed or minimally processed and are better for me. And we know a little bit better than that. That's not the case. But very smart. Kudos to them in their marketing strategy and how to get people through the doors. But trust me, yes, they do have, as any other grocery store, have some minimally processed, unprocessed foods. But trust me, they have some of those ultra processed foods too. So just some examples. Again, vegetables, fruit, including, remember, the frozen, fresh, or unsweetened dry products. So we're thinking about groups 1 and 2, right? Because they've just been, again, for increasing shelf life, they've just been either dry, boiled, making food safety. Things like grains or buckwheat, brown rice, quinoa, these types of things are what we when we think about whole foods that we want to include in our diet. Some more examples. Herbs, spices, really great way to boost up our meals, adding some herbs and spices to different foods, really a good way. Nuts and seeds, these are the ones. I put 100% fruit juice there, now in moderation, but I'm talking about if you are able to squeeze that orange, because at times I personally do not, anything that's in the bottle or in the grocery store says 100%, something has been done to it so it can sit there. So unless you are juicing at home, your own juices, then, and again, in moderation, but not the 100% juices that you see in the grocery store. So we're thinking about foods made from whole foods, granola, dried fruit oils, olive oil, avocado oil, those are the things. So again, as you can see, some of the foods are still processed. So remember I said, we eat, if you say I eat processed foods, a lot of times people say, oh, you do? But you know what? We all do to some extent. And remember, process does not equal unhealthy. But a better way of describing our food is in terms of the nutrient density. And that is just looking at how many nutrients there are in the food per gram. And that's where reading labels comes in handy. And someone mentioned that in one of the questions. So I hope that person is on today so that you can see that reading our labels and really taking charge of what we purchase is key. So I just thought we'd do a quick overview, because sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I don't really know how to read labels. I'm a bit confused. So just a quick overview of how to do label reading. And this is something, again, I work with my clients with on a one-on-one basis to help them. Some people just say, you know what, can you just show me how to read a label? And I'm like, for sure, let's go through this. So we're going to do a little quick class here on labeling. So one of the first things you always want to look at is the size, so the amount of food. You can't compare 100 grams to 200 grams. That's when you got to start doing math in your head, because they're not the same in terms of weight. So you want to make sure the weight is comparable when you're picking up your, as I said, 2 different boxes of crackers or 2 different burgers, or what it is. You want to make sure that they are comparable in weight. Now, about 5 to 10 grams in difference, that's okay. But when we're talking about, as I said, like something that's 100 versus something that's 150 or something that's 200, then we need to look at something so the sizes are more okay. So there we go, size. Then we want to start taking a look at some of the things we want a little or a lot of. And first of all, we take a look at the calories. Now, calories don't always tell the story, but they're there to look at. I always say calories can be deceiving. That's not always what we want to look at. but we want to look at some of the nutrients and things that we do want in most of our foods. So some of the things that we may be looking for that we want more of is, for instance, this here is a burger. So in a burger, I'm not expecting to get fiber and sugars. That's just because it's an animal product. Now this is an animal product burger. So what I'm looking for more likely are things like protein and iron. Those are things I want more of. Now, when it comes to the fat, because again, this is an animal-based burger, maybe I want to scale back a bit. So looking at these two, I will see here that, okay, product one, has 18 grams. And what does that mean? A quick way for us to understand is looking at the daily value. So the daily value, I've got a little chart there that shows if we have a little or a lot of an ingredient, okay? And we always say the 5-15 rule is kind of what you want to think about. So 5% and under is a little, 15% and over is a lot. Excuse me. So we're looking at product one. We can see there that that burger has 28% fat, saturated fat 38. Maybe it's something that I'd like to look for a better choice. So look at product two. We see 17% of the fat comes from a saturated fat in terms of our daily value. So far, product two is winning. Then I'm going to think about the proteins. Okay, proteins are pretty much, on par, just 2 gram difference. And then the iron. So based on this, as again, we're just comparing our items as a quick lesson, is we most likely go for product two in this case. So looking at your food labels and the ingredient list for some of those keywords mentioned earlier, like the hydrolyzed proteins, modified starches, emulsifiers. Those are some of the things I should be telling you, do. Maybe I should put this product back and get something else. Again, looking at those calories and sugar. So calories tend to be much higher in our ultra processed. This is a quick note. Like if we're thinking about chips, pop, they tend to be a lot higher. I'm going to show you a quick example here. We're looking at the potato, and it's, you want to say, spectrum journey through processing. Again, if we're looking at serving size, remember, we want to make sure we're looking at the amount. So 100 grams. The unprocessed potato, just the potato as is, class 1. We look at, it's got, if you look at the calories, fats, everything is quite low in comparison. As we progress throughout the processing, you can see how processing comes in and it really starts to influence in a negative way the flavors, the fat, the salt. So taking something in its original form, I've had people tell me, oh, I like milk, I eat milk chocolate. And I'm like, that's great. Not the same thing. That's the same thing as saying potato chips are the same as potatoes. So I know it's really, it can be a little tongue-in-cheek kind of joke when you're like, oh yeah, I can have this and that. No, they're completely different because the ultra-processed foods usually have little to none of the original food. Sugars, again, these tend to be high. And a major culprit is those breakfast cereals. I'm just going to highlight those as a major culprit because, again, they're also marketed towards children. They're marketed as convenience and healthy. As, oh yeah, ready to go in the morning, have the cereal. But unfortunately, again, they're packed with so much sugar. And anytime you see fancy colors and flavoring, oh, this is honey nut, or this is cinnamon, or any of that, or it's blueberry flavor. Is it that? Remember, it's not actual blueberries. It's the flavor chemical of a blueberry. And thinking about, again, does that flavor actually taste like the blueberry you buy in the grocery store? Not really. So we want to consider other things. Overnight oats. If you're busy in the morning, get that going the night before. Always thinking about what you can do to take that, that burden off of yourself in the morning. A lot of people say, I'm crunched for time. I get it. I'm mama 3. I get it. Time in the morning is there always never seems to be enough. So we need to make sure that we are getting these things that we can do. So again, how do we tell the difference? Tend to be lower in fiber, protein, vitamins, minerals, higher in our fats, salts, and additives. They like to disguise a lot of these ultra-processed foods as healthy, especially our diet foods, because they're marketed as low in calories, no fats, no sugar. But just like in the video, I said, so if there's none of that, so how can it taste like Caesar dressing? Or again, with our pop, it has no sugar, no calories, then what is it? I want you to ask yourself these questions. Then yeah, it's been most likely processed. So you might be thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so then what can I eat? Like, we're talking all of this stuff. Just get to the nitty-gritty. Okay? And this is a chart. And again, remember, these slides will be available in the replay. You'll be able to watch this and probably, you can take a look, spend some time on the slides. But again, just showing you the degree of processing. We'll pick again the beginning here, the first one, sweetened breakfast cereals, ultra processed. The processed version, maybe a plain brand cereal. So again, it's not the brand, it's not in its original form, but it's also not sweetened and colored and all that stuff. But again, a better choice is going for something like an oatmeal. There's also different types of oatmeal on the market now. There's quinoa based, there's all different, millet, all these different things that you can mix together, bulgur, make a porridge from that. That is the more, I want to say, unprocessed, minimally processed version. Again, how to do this. Got here we're going to go through each one in terms of letting you think about, well, what do? We want to know how we can release these things in our diet. First and foremost, try to prepare as much as you can from home. I understand time is of the essence. I said, I get it. I'm now a mom of 3. I've got 9, 7, and an 11-month year. So it's busy in my house. And so in terms of between work, family, just trying to, self-care, all of that stuff, it's hard. But we got to make time for it. And it gives you that control. You know what you're putting in. You don't, well, I shouldn't say maybe you do, but most people don't have these fancy colorants, emulsifiers, those types of things in their home. So it's a good thing about making from scratch. Here is where I go to, I know there's so much more out there, but personally, I really like Pinterest. I have folders for everything, cookies, soups, all of that. I put them in all my different folders. And then, of course, I modify as I go along. For me, I take a recipe and I almost use it just as a guide. I don't use it as a law, and I will change things up because we have food allergies. We have all different likes and dislikes in my family. So it's really hard for me to follow something right to the T. I got to mix things up. Instagram, another good place to find videos of people making things, ideas, allrecipes.com. And I also found this website here called happillyunprocessed.com. Now, some of the recipes she has posted on here I thought were really good. Some, but again, hey, these are just ideas. And she's on that, on that route of trying to make foods and trying to be in that unprocessed, minimally processed. Because of course, unprocessed is what gets people. And I'm like, you got some processed stuff in there, okay? But I get where you're going. It's just like Whole Foods. Yeah, okay. Marketing, so key. I got to get in on that. But yes, so these are some areas to go and find some good recipes. Snacks. We want to make sure that we have these things on hand. It's our toolkit. We're going to build a house and all we have is a hammer. We're like, okay, I'm here to build a house. You're not going to build a house with just a hammer. You need other things. Same thing with her snacks. We need to make sure we've got some healthier, easy snacks on hand. nuts, these unsweetened. So I'm not talking about barbecue flavored peanuts, but those are the kind of things we want to keep on hand. Fruits and vegetables, I always say, hey, a banana, it's in the cake, it's to go. It's what it is. Like, there you go. It's an easy to go snack. Same thing with an apple, orange, same type of thing. We want to make sure that we are keeping those things on hand. Homemade granola, also not as intimidating. I'll tell you the truth, I thought it was intimidating to make. It really isn't, because it's really just getting the ingredients and throwing them all together. So it's really not as, well, to me, as intimidating as it seems. Keeping these things on hand. Hydrate. A lot of times, and if you've been in any of my talks, I really talk about consuming water. We mistake hunger for thirst. Just making sure that we're hydrating ourselves. If you see, I've got a little bit of a throat tickle, but I've got my tea, I've got my water. I'm always trying to keep it on hand, because also I admit I'm somebody that forgets to drink. I'll get so wrapped up in what I'm doing. So it's always important to keep that on hand. Keeping it at your desk, wherever you are, I travel, and to keep myself accountable. It's really good to keep. So again, hydrate. All the reasons why we want to make ourselves, make sure we're hydrated, just makes us feel better. And it's so good for physiological being. So making sure that we've got water, fluids, herbal teas, coffee, unsweetened, those types of things we want to keep on hand. Meal plan, again, giving you that control. It allows you now to decide how, for my week, you pick a day. Okay, this is what I'm gonna have for my breakfast. And meal doesn't mean you have to have every meal done. It can be, I'm just gonna plan out my breakfasts for the week. For my kids, I meal plan their lunches. Sundays, we sit, we talk, and it helps with my grocery shopping. We get all the lunches done. It doesn't have to be like breakfast, lunch, snack, all of that. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Pick one meal or pick one snack. Again, allows that control, so you'll know that you're going to be not, going through the drive-through and getting, a donut, or, picking up some fries, because you planned. Reevaluate your grocery shopping. So again, going back to those food labels, taking some time in the grocery store. Try not to go when you're hungry or too rushed, because then you're picking up those things, or the things that are on sale, or the point of purchase sales. I love it when you're at the checkout and they're like, oh, we have a deal on potato chips. Would you like to add this to your to your order? It's like, no, just keep it going. So when you're able to be relaxed and you know what you're getting, you made your list, you know that the foods you're going to choose, that's the way we want to. So I want you to reevaluate your grocery shopping as a way of trying to reduce some of those easy, convenient foods. And lastly, I want you to think about what's in your pantry and your fridge. Doing some switch ups. So for instance, if you've got a lot of refined grains, look for some more whole grains. Sugary drinks for water or homemade juices. If you have a lot of chips, or salty snacks, crackers, think about having nuts, popcorn, dehydrated fruits or vegetables. If you like salad dressings, I love, think about switching up some of your store-bought dressings for homemade vinaigrettes. And I understand some of them, if you like a Caesar salad, you may, well, how am I going to make? You can make a Caesar dressing from scratch, but at least if you've got, let's say you've got 5 dressings, they say most people have about 3 to 4 dressings in their fridge. Think about, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll buy the Caesar, but I'm going to make a vinaigrette instead of buying Italian or herb or, Greek feta, that type of thing, and make one. Think about that, so just some of those switch ups, just again, to reduce the amount of these ultra processed foods. Excuse me. All right. So just to recap of how, this is the thing. So what can we do? Prepare foods from scratch at home. Keep healthy, nutrient-dense snacks on hand. Hydrate. Plan those meals. Reevaluate your grocery shopping. And think about what's in your fridge and pantry. Okay. So now we can open up to some questions. Okay, I do apologize, we got about 3 to 4 minutes for some questions. And I do hope, because I did take consideration some questions that came in and place them in the presentation. So I really do hope that most of your questions have been answered. But let's take a look here. And we have some that come through and some that have been already pre-submitted. Okay, so Christine, I know one of the questions, I'll just start off where, assuming our body can tolerate ultra-processed, when does it become a danger? Again, that was something that was addressed, and I thought that was important, is when it becomes a major part of our diet. So, for instance, when you're packing your lunch, if you're packing your lunch and all you have is packages, like, okay, I've got a bear paw, and then I've got a protein bar in this package, like everything is already that's a clue. You want to have some things that are less processed, something that you've made at home, or some fruit, some vegetables, veggie sticks, that type of thing. So that's when it becomes a danger, when the majority, the percentage. If you look at your plate or you look at your lunchbox, and there's more things that come in a package that you have to open up, that should give you a clue. Because again, if this is part of your everyday diet, that's when it's going to catch up on you. You're not going to feel, oh, I had, a cookie this morning, so now I feel bad. No, it's over time. And again, thinking about that twin study, that's a really good example showing how the effects are, is that it's kind of insidious, very slowly, but it's there, it's eating away. So thinking about that. Okay, are there any other questions, Christine, that we want to kind of?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a really good question that came in from Edith, and she's saying, you started off, first of all, thank you. There's lots of comments saying how great this is in the chat, lots of information. Some people were asking you to, go back to the slides, and I pointed out, everyone gets a recording of this. So when you get the recording, then you can pause. And I think you mentioned it too. You can pause, you can take down lots of notes, because there definitely is lots of information. The one thing before I get to Edith's point is, when we had you last year and you talked about water, that's something that I've used. You mentioned, because you talked about hydration being so important, you suggested when you have water to put it in a glass or a container where you can see it. And I started doing that, and it makes a huge difference.
Yes.
So I wanted to pass that along. That was some information you gave at our last At Home with Mac series. And anyway, so let's get to Edith, because she wanted to talk about the NOVA categorizations.
Okay.
So she's saying, or asking, would you suggest that some clients move gradually from NOVA level 4, so if you're ultra processed, to 3, to 2, to 1 as baby steps, for example?
For sure.
Do you think it would help with re-educating the palate?
Exactly. You got it right there. That is key. Re-educating the palate, because we are in a society of sweetness and salt. So that's what we go towards. So just jumping cold turkey to, for instance, again, I'll use myself as an example. When I'm a coffee drinker, that's my thing. And I admit, when I used to have the double, and then I realized, having this double, it just was not, I was getting the headaches, the sugar, and then when I even started learning about how much sugar was in that, so I slowly started to reduce. Slowly, so I went from, just 1 and 1. Then it became like, okay, half milk, half sugar. Then I was like, I started to enjoy actually the taste of coffee. And so then got rid of the sugar, got rid of the milk, and now I'm into black. And a lot of people say, oh, how can you drink that? And I love an espresso. I learned to love the bitterness and the flavor notes that come with coffee. But it was gradual. We have to give ourselves a break. A lot of times, and I want you guys to think about this, when you're moving through the spectrum, is just as Edith pointed out, gradually go. So go from, let's say, again, I'll pick with the potato chips. If you love chips, you're like, you know what? No, I can't give up my chips. That's my thing. Okay. If that's the case, look for ones that are less salted. Then you can progress into ones that are probably even more baked. Even get creative. On Pinterest, you can make your own type of chip if you have, cutting the potatoes very thinly, even with just, they have all kind of like a mandolin. That's what it's called. I couldn't remember the name. And doing them in the oven or air fryer, it's a lot easier than you think. And so many recipes are out there. So yes, gradually, that's the key.
Thank you. So gradual. Well, that would make sense. Okay, we have so many questions. So one good, it was at the top here about, they talked a lot about emulsifiers. So you talked about emulsifiers. That video showed emulsifiers. So Kayla was asking, so you mentioned one, CMC as an emulsifier. Are there some that are all emulsifiers bad? Should we look out for some over other ones? So as we're gradually trying to change what we're purchasing, so what we're eating, are there some that you would say, like right off the bat, if you see this emulsifier, like it should not be going into your pantry?
Yeah. So a lot of the ones, yes, that honestly, if they come with those acronyms and you can't pronounce them, those are the ones that you really want to just say, okay, put them aside. Now there are ones that, of course, like the gums. Gums are emulsifiers. So you see things like guar gums, and they have different, as I said, they work as emulsifiers also. So they'll be like more natural emulsifiers. Gelatin is another one that works as an emulsifier, and they'll say, okay, this is a plant-based gel. But again, that comes, how does it become in that form, right? So even though they may be natural emulsifiers, natural gums, natural gelatins, and I say that with quotation marks, I want you to kind of think about reducing those. But especially the ones that have those 13 letters plus in them that you can't even pronounce. And it's like, as I said, like the one he showed there, we want to really try and just put those ones back because those are the chemicals. But again, anytime you take something from its original form, that was also, you need to add something back to mimic it, because people are going to say, well, why is this so watery? Or the consistency isn't there. The tongue feel isn't there. And then, of course, it's not going to sell as the ultra processed version does. So this is the thing again. And also, sometimes, just like you mentioned, gradually moving away is what you have to do.
Great, thank you. So natural, it's sort of one of those marketing ploys, right?
Yes, it's another one
that you talked about.
Natural flavoring, all of that. You have to really, as I said, look at the fine print there. But they're the words that they know they want us to hear, but they're not always great for us either.
They're not going to trick us who are on this webinar.
Yes, exactly. It's like, I'm aware.
Yeah. So Ingrid has shared a really cute comment that I want to share with everyone. She once heard something that's had a great impact on her. If you want a snack, have an apple. And if you don't want the apple, you don't need a snack.
Exactly.
Isn't that clever? So there have been a couple questions about meats and nitrates, preserved meats, right? So, you talked about, I think that's probably category 2, that you have to have some ingredients, added ingredients. So what about these meats? Like, where are they on the spectrum? Would you recommend them? Should we avoid them, or maybe just eat in more moderation?
Yes. So that's a big one too. So you'll see that there's some that are again naturally preserved, and they'll use what they're using is a celery extract that mimics using some of those nitrates. So again, they are in the deli meats fall in between the group 3 to 4. And so unfortunately, they are the ones that we really have to try to limit. And because if you think about it, how do you get, when you go to the deli, everything is in a circle, right? And it's all wrapped in plastic. So how do you get that chicken, turkey, pork the way it is. And as much as they want to spiel, oh yes, we use natural additives, we use natural preservatives, they still are preservatives. And even there's been a lot of controversy on that celery extract that they're that are marketed a lot. And it's one of these things that we have to accept. If you're gonna eat that type of meat, like let's say you love Subway, you go, or you're making sandwiches, then you're gonna have to, this is how it is. Unless, now, the alternative is to buy chicken breast, or buy turkey breast, or, buy roast beef, put that in the oven. Now, again, we're thinking about time, convenience, but it's that trade-off. How badly do you want that in your sandwich? And some stores are, roasting and doing these things in-house. But I've even asked, and they add so much salt. It doesn't mean they're better. Like, for instance, the Costco chicken. I'm gonna pick on those for a second because everyone, they're cheap. Everyone rushes to those Costco chickens, and a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I'll buy that. I'll use it for sandwiches," and and I can see how people think they're doing a good thing because they're not buying, a frozen chicken finger. But the amount of sodium that they place in those chickens and the seed, it's, in a way, I'm like, you can probably find a better chicken finger than that, again, with that roast chicken from Costco that they're selling, or in any of these grocery stores. So again, the control is yours when you make it from home and mixing it up. So instead of having a ham sandwich every day, let's say you love deli or salami or whatever it is, pick one day, other days of the week you have something else.
Well, I'm disappointed because I like prosciutto. So I guess prosciutto is out.
I know.
Although it doesn't come in a circle. It comes in the shoulder.
Yes, exactly. But get cured meats, right?
Yeah. So lots
really
of salt.
Yeah, lots and lots of salt. Even if, a lot of people say, I met people to do a lot of these things themselves, like they say, oh no, I do a lot of, I cure some, meats, I do canning. I've seen people who actually, and I'm like, whoa, wow, but again, we still want to limit a lot of that because again, in order for it to get to the form and the flavor, that's why I start asking, like, what do you add to it? And then they start saying, like, you see, here comes the list, right? And so they're like, oh yeah, so just because you're doing it at home also doesn't mean it's like better if you're using those same types of ingredients.
Right. Okay. Well, that actually is a good segue into this this question by Shiraz. Would foods prepared at home be considered ultra processed? So they said like homemade cakes and cookies, which I'm going to say is probably yes and no, depending on what you add to them.
Exactly. Yeah. So, of course, making, let's say, muffins at home compared to buying your muffin in the grocery store is a better choice. For instance, think about when you go to the bakery and you see those muffins that are packaged. They stay, or even bread. How come that bread can be 2 weeks? But if I make bread at home, within like 3 days, it's starting to taste odd. I'm lucky if I can get 5 days to a week of homemade bread or homemade muffins. And that's the thing I like to do for my kids, make little muffins. And yeah, I freeze them because that's a way to, I'll make a batch and then I freeze because they don't last. And so you think about asking yourself those questions is that, I'm making a bread muffin at home versus the one I'm buying from the store. The one at home doesn't last as long. But of course, there is processing there because how did you get the flour? How did you get the sugar? So remember that NOVA classification is from the whole form. We are not using the actual wheat and sugar cane in our kitchens, right? So our food that we cook, let's face it, process doesn't always mean unhealthy. It's the degree. So most of the things we prepare is processed, even because we have to use, as I said, either the salts or the herbs, the dried herbs, or any of those things in our foods for it to get how it is. Even ground beef, for example, when that's the process of grinding the meat from the actual chunk of meat is a process, right? So keeping that in mind, so that's why we have to be very, very aware how we use that term of processed food, and that's why I brought in that nutrient density. That's a key way of deciding, okay, well, what's the nutrient density of my food rather than if it's processed, because almost all food has some type of processing unless you're getting it from the source itself.
Yeah, someone else commented, I had that was new to me, like the 5%, 15% is a good way to judge, and the daily value. Like I never look at that. And someone in the chat said, "Oh, that was a really sort of enlightening way to look at things." So thank you again for that. So someone did ask basmati rice versus brown rice. Better, worse? They're both processed, right? They're both, although I guess one would be more because one's white.
Exactly. Christine, you're doing it. You're going. I should just pack up and say, yeah, just take it away.
I've learned a lot from you. This is like our third or fourth webinar together, so I'm learning.
Yeah, you're very right, because think about it. Rice in itself is not that crisp white. So basmati is a different type of rice, but it's again another type of processed white rice. So there's also brown basmati rice. So that's another way of kind of going, on the other side of the degree of processing. So maybe going for the brown version, but that white basmati or jasmine, that thing, yes, they are, a lot of the fiber has been stripped away, they've been bleached, that type of thing. So you really want to go for more of your grains that look more, as they say, the ancient grains that have more of the brown color, more husky, they're more dense. So you really, a lot of that tongue feel, you got to chew it out in order for them to break down more. Those are the kind of grains you want to go for in terms of your rice. So that's why things like bulgur, quinoa, wild rice are more on the side of the ones we want to choose more of.
Hopefully that answers Claire's question. So here's a question, because I know we have a number of people from the Optimal Aging Portal, attendees who attend those webinar series that we do, who are who signed up for this one. Boost, right? I know that the Boost nutrition drinks. What's sort of your take on those for people who are needing nutrients?
So when it comes to Boost or the Ensure, Glucerna, those are, I always say, are emergency go-tos, because yes, they are processed. They are made to be something that we will have. I know I recommend to clients who really cannot get in the nutrients they need. So they're really, if you want to say, they said those emergency last line of defense type of things. They're not really eating like foods. They, for some particular reason, whether it be for, illness reasons or anything like that, digestive reasons. So those, because they're not much different than saying, okay, I'm going to go and have muscle milk. I don't know if you've seen that, but those protein shakes that they market to, to kids or, adolescents, those types of things. So really being careful of how much of those you're having. Of course, they are good go-tos for instance, I will have a lot of clients that take Glucerna because they're diabetic. Let's say they're on the road, they cannot get to have a snack, or I say keep one of those on hand. Or for a lot of my patients or clients where their oral nutrition needs are quite low because of certain illnesses, then they need to go that route. But they're not something that I recommend for our, just healthy, oh, I want something to eat kind of thing, a drink. No, I always say, if you can eat your food, get it from the original form, that's best.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I apologize. I'm only half paying attention to you. I'm trying to pay attention to all of these questions that are coming in, and I'm trying to lump some together because they kind of come in themes.
Yes.
So a couple of people have asked butter versus basil.
Oh,
I don't.
Yep. The margarine.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's always a big one. And again, think about the degree of processing. Now, there are certain reasons why certain, individuals may use margarine, because of course, it's got that heart health and that. It's because our body doesn't recognize margarine because it's a chemical. We'll just put it out there. It's more chemically processed. Again, let's think about that classification system. Butter is really just milk gone through a different processing, right? So actually butter falls under the group 2 because you're really adding just salt and, turning it until it gets to its butter form. So in terms of purity, when it comes to margarine versus butter wins. However, butter, that's not saying it's great for you either, right? It is very high in fats and those saturated fats. So we do want to be mindful of how much butter we're using. So just because, it's, if you want to say, a processed food that's minimally, I say that, it's again a group 2, doesn't mean that that's a better choice. The thing about margarine, it's something that's been, margarine falls into the ultra processed, the group 4, because it's a chemical made to mimic the taste. There's nothing real about margarine. So that's why it's deemed as healthier, because our body's like, we don't know what to do with it. We just let it pass through. But it doesn't pass through without damaging and touching other things as it goes through our system, right? So it's the same thing like those artificial sweeteners, that same concept. Yes, there's no sugar, but to mimic the sugar, there are these artificial sweeteners that tries to fool our body, but those chemicals still linger inside of us. So what I always say is that if you can use butter, do so, but in moderation, right? We can't be slapping it on, everything and using it, but being mindful, and then going for even other, if you say other oils like avocado oil, olive oil, those types of things on, in cooking or on bread, that type of thing, if you're looking for that flavor. But yes, when it comes to thinking about where does margarine and butter fall, butter would be class 2, margarine is 4.
So there we go. So might go with number 2. It's lower.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's if you go to Europe, especially Italy, because my in-laws are Italian, it's not butter on bread. It's a little bit of olive oil and
There you go.
balsamic, right?
Yeah. And that's a much better way to go.
So Vicky's asking rolled oats versus steel cut.
So that
she gets conflicting advice. What is better? What is different? Is one
if they're the
more
same,
processed than the other?
They're almost, okay, in terms of processing, yes, one is more processed, but it's just based on the cutting. So they come from the same, they're all oats, but steel cut is more coarsely cut. So when it's more coarsely cut, it keeps us full longer because it's for our body to break down, versus rolled oats, even versus microwave oats. So if you want to kind of go, they're all oatmeal, but it's how, again, the degree of processing. So think about how long does it take to break down in your body is also an indication of its processing. So steel cut is more coarsely cut oats, so still oatmeal, but it's just cut more coarsely, therefore it keeps us full longer. Then I go for, those large flake rolled oats. Then the next one underneath that would probably be a quick oats, and then the worst one out of the oats is the microwave. But they're all oats, but it's how they are cut that is the difference. And of course, the sweetening and all that. I'm talking about plain oats.
Thank you. You probably saw me. I was taking notes furiously on that because I do like oats. And sometimes I think the one of the twins in the study having quinoa for breakfast, like having a quinoa oatmeal.
Yeah. Again, another form of as I said, there's quinoa, there's millet, there's bulgur, there's different grains that you can have, again, just for a different flavor, different mouthfeel. They're all really also good choices.
So the question, there's a few questions about homemade granola, right? Granola is a great breakfast cereal, also good to have a snack. So I'm going to kind of summarize these. Do you have recommendations for substitute for sugars? Because quite often it sounds like they have sugars.
Yes.
And so that's one. Are dried fruits good to add in, or should it just be mostly nuts and oats?
So if you want that sweet taste, you can add in some of the dried fruits. Of course, we don't want it to be a fruit bar, right? So again, how much you're adding in, but the dried fruits, again, naturally dried fruits, not the ones, there's the ones that are, again, sweetened. They have like little crystal sugars on them. I see them at the bulk barn all the time. But fruits are a good way to add that, dried fruits are a good way to add that sweetness. Now, if you're thinking about, okay, another type of sweetener you may want to use, then we can start looking at things like maple syrup or honey. Those are, and again, that really helps with the stickiness, the keeping it together, for the sweet taste. You can add a little bit of dark chocolate. Now, 70%, between 70 and 80, anything above 80, you're starting to, it doesn't taste like chocolate anymore. And when we're starting, and anything under 70, then we're getting into, okay, the milk chocolate debate, where it's like, oh, I have milk chocolate. Is that milk? No. So 70% is a good, if you like that chocolate feel in there. So just adding in some of the 70% dark chocolate into your granola, but using things as even agave syrup, maple syrup, and honey are some sweeteners you can use instead of using sugar.
I laugh because my coworker and I don't like dark chocolate. I like milk. But she only eats dark chocolate, and it's a treat for her. She'll have a square and I'm like, oh, it just tastes so because of course the milk chocolate has more crap in it, and so it's changing how
exactly. Everything is much. And the things about dark chocolate, you start to notice you can't eat a lot of it. Where milk chocolate, you can go to town, Easter's coming, you see those bunnies that are coming out, like you can eat one of those easily. If that was 70% dark chocolate, you would feel sick by the time you're done, like one ear. So
right. Okay. So I really do need to move on to the dark chocolate. Okay. We have gone way over. So thank you. I will ask one last question.
For sure. I love it.
And then I think we'll wrap it up. So this is, would you consider taking raw cashews and other ingredients, nuts, tahini, miso, traditional yeast, spices, etc., into a homemade dairy-free cheese sauce as an okay minimally processed food?
Okay, so all of those ingredients, so is that like a recipe kind of thing where?
It sounds like a yes.
Yeah. So again, all you're pretty much doing is taking both and putting them together, from what I gather, and to make that flavor. So that would be a better choice than going and actually purchasing the item. So if you're using many different herbs and spices, and you said the raw cashews and all of that, that's great, because you're taking in all of these minimally processed foods to make your meal. And that's what you want you to do, is to use those minimally processed foods more often in your food.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to leave with one note that Lee left that says ultra-processed foods has just come on their radar, but I see that doctors have been posting the issue since at least 2017. So thanking you for explaining and giving the thumbs up for dark chocolate. But yes, when Jenille and I were talking about what topic do we want to cover, I will say that I had heard a interview. I listen to CBC quite often, and on CBC's The Current, there was a talk with a British medical doctor, and he wrote a book, I think, called Ultra Processed People. And that was the first time, and that was about a year ago that I think it was on CBC. I'll put it in the email with the link. And that is what really triggered my sort of thought process, like, oh, wow, we really don't know what's in our food. And to Lee's point, yeah, like people have been discussing the ill effects of all of these chemicals that we're ingesting, and we don't really know, what the outcomes are going to be other than diabetes and obesity. We know that those are issues. So thank you, Jenille, for this wonderful talk, for clarifying, what is processed, because everything seems to be processed. It's just the ultra processed that are the problems. You've given us lots of information that we can go back to our pantries and to our fridges and say, nope, this has got to go. This got to go. This can stay.
Yes. I'm glad it was my pleasure to provide, and I always learn a lot too, and I love the questions that come in, because again, it gets you thinking about I never thought about that, or I never thought about this. So yeah, no, it was great. Thank you so much for having me again to share some knowledge with the group, and it was my pleasure.
Thank you, Jenille. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for, we still have a lot of people on the call. So even though we've gone over, thank you for staying with us. And hopefully many of your answers were, many of your questions were answered through the Q&A portion.
Or please feel free to reach out to me through email or Instagram. And I'd love to hear from everyone and see what some of your thoughts are. It gets me thinking. I'm like, okay, this is a topic I should delve into.
Great. Thanks, Jenille. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon with your kids.
Yes. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.